everything okay? My task tonight is to read questions, so I hope you have written some, and if you feel moved during the event tonight, we've got 90 minutes together, feel free to jump up and write some more, and we'll get in as many as we possibly can. We're going to start tonight's program with a 2-minute opening statement from each candidate, and then we'll be drawing questions from the hat until we run out of time. And I'll direct them possibly to one or two people. Maybe they're more relevant to the post that they're seeking. But if anybody else wants to say something, we're all here, and this is your chance to see people. I love this room, by the way. This is the room where the league and our candidates and office holders get to meet the people, and the people get to hold them accountable. So hats off to the League of Women Voters and to the Evansville Public Library for the remarkable work that they do year in and year out. So that was my speech for the evening. I'm going to start with our candidate closest to me, Destiny Wells, who's running for Secretary of State.
I've done enough of these. I was last in my seat, and that's why I got this one. Happy to be here. So, Destiny Scott, running for Secretary of State. A little bit about me. 2016, I landed in Afghanistan 2 weeks before the 2016 election, and I thought I was going to have a woman commander-in-chief in a matter of months. And for the next 13 months, I served with NATO. And I tell people, we are truly the shining city on the hill if we want to keep it. Because when we are off kilter, it is felt throughout the world, as I know, because I was asked a lot of questions for the next 13 months. I'm an attorney. I've been a deputy attorney general. I've served also with the city of Indianapolis. My family is half farmers and half laborers, or labor. I am a first-generation college graduate, which is largely why I found myself watching one group of girls go to Rush at sorority and me going to the recruiter's office. So it has definitely brought me full circle here, running for Secretary of State. This race has never been more important. Democracy is on the ballot this year. Democracy. And I'm pouring all my sweat and tears to make sure that election subversion does not happen in the state of Indiana this year and in the years to come. So that is a little bit about me, and I'll share more later.
Next up is the birthday boy from District 77, Ryan Hatfield, State Representative.
Good evening. Hi, my name is Ryan Hatfield, State Representative, District 77, which encompasses Evansville, traditionally southern half or south of the Lloyd Expressway. Let me introduce you to my wife, Kendra, who's here. Our two girls, Olivia and Rose, are with their babysitter tonight so that Kendra could be here. And we're very pleased to represent you in the Indiana General Assembly. I am really honored to be the only legislator who serves as the ranking member on two committees in the Indiana General Assembly. That is Labor, and I also serve as the ranking member of Courts and Judiciary. I also serve on Health and Utilities, and I think that while Indiana has done some financially stable moves, we haven't made economically prudent moves. And so what that means is the financial stability of Indiana's government is really strong. However, the economic position of our people has suffered. And so when you hear Republicans talk about the financial viability of the government, quite frankly, I think they're right. The problem is they leave out the fact that the economic stability of our people has suffered under their rule. Our people here, Hoosiers in this state, make less than the states around us. They go to schools that aren't as well ranked as schools in the states around us. Their unemployment system isn't as secure as the states around us. And I think two major issues that are coming before the General Assembly in the session to come, healthcare and utilities. Right now, we're discussing what we're going to do about rolling blackouts in the state of Indiana this summer. That's because of the GOP leadership in this state. We're also discussing about what to do about healthcare prices, where Hoosiers are paying over $100 for insulin that Canadians are paying just $1 for. I was proud to support and offer an amendment in the General Assembly that actually passed the House and was killed by GOP leadership that would have provided needed medications, prescription drugs in this state for prices just cents on the dollar to what they are today, that was killed by GOP leadership. So I'm very proud to represent you in the General Assembly. I continue to fight for you every single day. I think that we have some important issues to discuss tonight, and I look forward to discussing those with you. Thank you.
All right, and I'm pleased to introduce also running for District 77 in the Indiana House of Representatives, Jada Burton.
Hello everyone, I'm super excited to be a part of a bipartisan town hall that's not just focused on party problems, but it's focused on the people's problems, because I think that's what matters, and not focusing on party issues, but what matters to the people. It's very important to me because I come from very humble beginnings. I had a single mother, she was a waitress. I started a job when I was 14 and I was paying bills in the home, so I know exactly what it means for a government to abuse people and leave us underneath and poor. I want to create more economic things for Indiana that will provide people for safety, and I also would like to bring in my youth and my perspective of what it is to be poor, because there's people that talking about being poor but they've never experienced what it is to be poor, and they don't understand what it really does to your education, your mental health, where you land on in life. And so I really want to bring in my youth and those perspectives to the General Assembly and not just talk about it, something I don't know. So I hope today you guys can ask me questions and get to know more about me, and I'm super excited to be here so I know exactly how to help the people of Indiana.
All right, one of several candidates here tonight seeking federal office. We have James Sceniak running for the U.S. Senate.
Good evening, thank you. Thank you for coming out. First and foremost, this is about you, because as a public servant, I want to represent you, and I appreciate the questions. If you weren't here today, it wouldn't be a town hall. So thank you for doing your duty, and thank you for being an informed voter. I'm James Sceniak, and I am seeking the U.S. Senate race as a Libertarian. I am a behavior therapist, so I work with kids with autism, and it's really important for me to represent you as Hoosiers. I'm running on three things. Fiscal sanity is number one. Todd Young does not represent us in Washington, D.C. He's absolutely wasting the Hoosier dollar, and our wallets are hurting every day because of it. When I first started running, it was about $30 to fill up my tank. The other day I filled it up for $45. Inflation continues to hurt us, and it's not just Biden's fault, as Todd Young points out. It's Todd Young's fault, so we need somebody to represent us better in Washington, D.C. The second thing I'm running on is my Medical Freedom Act. I don't believe that politicians should act as physicians. From Washington, D.C., they cannot make an individual medical decision for you and your body. This affects women, this affects all Hoosiers, and this is important to represent in Washington, D.C. The third thing that I'm running on is my vet care program. I don't believe that we have served our veterans fairly. In fact, it's atrocious how our veterans are hurting. We see high suicide rates, we see high homeless rates, and we have not taken care of our veterans. My vet care program is to fix this issue. It takes the funding from the VA and puts it to a health savings account, which I call Veterans Personal Care Account, that allows veterans to have the medical freedom and choose whatever physician is best to meet their needs and whatever location is most convenient for them. It's about giving them the right. We trusted them to fight for our freedoms. Why don't we trust them for their own medical decisions? This is absolutely important that we represent in Washington, D.C. Again, thanks for coming out. I love town halls. This is my 10th. It's great to be in Evansville for my second time. I plan on coming down a few more times because you are the people that I'm going to be representing. It's a public service office, and first and foremost, you are what's important. So thanks, and I appreciate your time today.
Okay, thank you. We're almost done. Our Libertarian nominee for Secretary of State, Jeff Maurer.
Yes, so as you just heard, my name is Jeff Maurer, M-A-U-R-E-R, and I am the Libertarian candidate seeking the Secretary of State's office. We're all here tonight because we can recognize there's something very ill in our society, in our democracy. And we see the hurt that happened after the 2000 elections. We see the hurt that happened after 2016. And we see the violence that happened after 2020. Our future depends on this. We have to get this right. And so I come forward to you with a plan, a solution, not just, I'm awesome, I'm great, but real solutions. I want to give you a receipt for your vote, something concrete, tangible, verifiable, so that you can go and see that your vote is counted. Think about a lottery ticket. You go to the counter, you buy a lottery ticket, you get a receipt. It has the terminal number, it has a date, time, location. You can then go online and look it up, and look up to see whether your numbers match, whether that is in fact a confirmation that you've won. Similar concept. We have greater trust in our lottery system today than we have in our elections. And that's a travesty. That's what I'm here to fix. So there are many other issues, things that I'd like to also champion in the General Assembly, including recall, to be able to recall an elected official, to bring power away from government and restore it to you, to us, to we the people. And similarly, referendum and ballot initiatives, which will again transfer power from the establishment that is not responsive. And we conveniently have a supermajority in Indiana, and I don't see one member of that party here tonight. That's how unresponsive they are. So using these tools that I want all of us to have and all of us to share to hold government responsible and accountable at all times to all people, to all Hoosiers, that's what I'm here to do with real solutions. I look forward to speaking more tonight. Thank you.
Next up is Ray McCormick, the Democratic nominee for Congress in the 8th District.
Thank you. And I appreciate being here at the library. This is a great facility, and I appreciate everybody coming out. I'm here at Evansville quite often because there's a lot going on down here. So I'm a farmer and a conservationist. So I'm fourth generation on the same hill as my great-grandfather. My son is out there right now side dressing corn and taking care of our land. So I show up, I work hard. I've worked hard all my life, but it's not just been as a farmer. It's been as a conservationist. I've traveled to Washington, D.C. I've traveled all over this country and worked on programs that impact not only people in this state, people in this country, but around the world. I've worked on climate change with Richard Lugar in the cap and trade days. I've worked with the National Association of Conservation Districts and Secretary Bill Sack on the soil health movement. I've worked on Endangered Species Act. I've worked on all of these things that impact our country. Without very healthy and resilient topsoils, clean water, clean air, and nutritious food, we don't have a great future. So the things that I've worked on impact all of us. But what it really is mostly going to impact is people that I'll never meet. Because the people that are going to live here and are going to move here with the economic boom that is happening right now that most people don't even understand or know about it, with the economic boom that's coming, it's going to be quality of life. Keeping our children and grandchildren here is what it's going to be all about. Nobody wants to have happen what happened to me. My daughter moved in Annapolis. Now I have 3 grandchildren in Annapolis, and I don't hardly ever see them. That happens to all of us across the 8th District. 21 counties have had happen what's happened to me in my life. The little school that I went to is a ghost town now. They're fighting to have clean water, and that's happening in the 8th District. So Evansville's big and vibrant, but there's a lot of parts of the 8th District that are being left behind. So having come from that background, not only can I communicate with people of the great city of Evansville, but I can communicate and understand what's happening to the people of Decker, Indiana. So I'm going to represent you all, and I'm going to do what my opponent never does, and that's show up, be accountable, listen, and work hard. Thank you.
Okay, the Democratic nominee for Indiana House of Representatives in the district in which I reside, Jason Sahlstrom.
I'm Jason Sahlstrom, and this is my first event like this, and I'm nervous. That's not a joke. I'm running because for the past 8 years, I've been working on strengthening the economic competitiveness of Indiana, specifically growing businesses, jobs in Southwest Indiana. And what I've learned from Hoosiers all over the state is that the biggest obstacle to Hoosier prosperity is our state house, and specifically the supermajority over the last decade. For example, results. Indiana today ranks 45th out of 50 in new businesses creating jobs. That is not a healthy business climate. We rank 46th out of 50 in wage growth. That's why Hoosiers are getting hit harder by inflation than most of the nation. And according to the Trump administration's Department of Health and Human Services, we are 50 out of 50, the worst state in the nation for children to flourish. So that's what the supermajority has given us over the last decade. That's why I'm running. I know what it takes for a state, a region, a city to compete in the 21st century. I know the strength that Indiana has, and I know that we should be leading, not losing. I know what it takes to turn this around so that our children, to ensure that our children are going to have a place to flourish and prosper here in Indiana. That's why I'm running. Thank you.
I don't know if you're old enough to remember this, but the first black Miss America was the lovely Vanessa Williams, who went on to have a great singing career. One of her hits was Save the Best for Last. And so I'm proud to introduce Andrew Horning, running for Congress.
Thank you. I was afraid when you said, I don't know if you're old enough to remember this. Are you old enough to remember Andy? He's run for office many times, and I have. I've run for office many times. I ran for U.S. Senate, I've run for governor, I've run for Congress. And being a libertarian, a lot of you might never have heard about that. So it's not like I'm a basketball player and everybody knows my name. I'm just running for governor and Senate and U.S. House of Representatives. So I have a little farm in Freedom, Indiana, which is a poor county in Owen County. But unlike Ray, I don't know anything about farming. That's not really my day job. I thought corn dressed itself, frankly. So I don't know anything about that. But I've been working in the medical industry my whole life. I've got 5 kids. I've worked in research, clinical, and now industry medical business, which is highly regulated, incredibly expensive, and incredibly corrupt. And one of the things that's been striking me really just in the last couple of years is that what I used to love to talk about, constitutional rule of law, and the things we call issues, that's kind of irrelevant right now. Because the biggest problem we have in the United States is contempt. We have a terrible problem, a bitter, angry problem between 2 parties that have both had power, plenty of power, in Washington, D.C., and even in this state of Indiana, even though that's been a while. The power that they wielded over us has not united us. This is like a tug of war over who can take the most away from the other side. We're trying to beat each other. We're not trying to win ourselves. And what really frustrates the heck out of me is we're not even talking anymore. So it doesn't matter which issue you're talking about. These days, there's some combination of words that's going to get even the sweet little lady sitting next to you on the church pew, it's going to make her fangs and claws come out. That's just the way we are right now. So I want to run for U.S. House of Representatives, but I feel like I need to run for marriage counselor of the U.S. House of Representatives. Because what we really need is somebody to stand in the middle. Somebody needs to stand in the middle. We have 2 aisles, 2 bitter factions that have more in common than they would like to believe. Everybody wants peace, prosperity, some degree of security, some degree of individual liberty. All of us want that. We disagree on not only how we want to get those things, but more importantly, how we even talk about it. We need to stop making each other angry. We need to talk, and we need to listen. And those are things that I really want to focus on in this campaign.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm looking at the clock, and we've got about an hour to answer questions, so I'm going to ask candidates to be as concise as they can, although some of these issues demand complicated answers. And you've heard the line, the last shall be first. I'm going to ask the first question to our last speaker, because the question that seems to be on people's minds is gun violence. Gun violence is a federal issue, and so I'm going to ask in order, Horning, McCormick, and then Sceniak, and then maybe if the state legislative candidates would like to say something, but I want to get through this. I don't know if you noticed, but I was kind of lax on the timekeeping, because I like people having a chance to say what they want to say. But I have a timer now, and it's set for 2 minutes. So these answers, if you would please, so we can keep them to 2 minutes. The broad question is, gun violence is on everybody's minds. What would you do as an office holder to combat this ongoing, really troublesome social issue?
Well, this is just one of those issues that has people tearing at each other's throats. And one of those issues that doesn't have people asking the right questions in my mind. For instance, is it women that have been shooting up places and like burning cities and firebombing churches and so on? No, it's young men. And the question that I'd like to ask in relationship to violence is also the same question I would ask in relationship to increasing suicide rates, to increasing violence in school that doesn't involve guns, to poorer performance in school, more dependence on drugs, more drug deaths, more poorer behavior in school in general. We're tearing our boys apart. We're doing something wrong with our young men. And I want to talk about that because we keep talking about everything else. You know, I posed this question online not too long ago. It's not like I don't want to talk about, if we had more time, I would love to talk about what my issues with guns are, because I do have some issues with guns. I think a lot of Republicans have it wrong in terms of how they look at guns and how they're defending guns, in terms of they're not defending the Constitution, they're defending guns as an isolated thing. And I think a lot of us are similarly missing the ball. When we get so focused on something, we're forgetting who's picking up these guns, why are they picking up these guns? They're stealing guns, and they're doing bad things even without guns. So it's no less a problem when they're firebombing cities or when they're blowing up threatening a judge. That just happened. So the violence that we see coming out of our young men is not an isolated thing. We're doing something with our young men that's fairly new. And if you look at the rates of violence, the performance in schools, I think the first thing we need to address is what the heck we're doing with our young men. And when I asked this online, I had all kinds of people firing back, well, what about guns? Well, what about abortion? What about every other issue except this one? And I really want to talk about it. What are we doing to our young men? The guns are a symptom. Oh. He was pointing at me when he was talking about timers, so.
So I grew up on a farm, and my dad took me out. We went rabbit hunting, but I didn't get to carry a gun. It wasn't safe. So I was the beagle that would go in the briar. But it meant a lot to me to go out with my uncles and my dad on Thanksgiving Day on our farm and hunt quail and rabbits. And so I was just loved hunting. So as soon as they would let me, I got a .22 rifle that was my grandpa's, and I would chase my beagle around. Then I got a shotgun. And now I have a hunting business. So every year I have people that lease my ground. We get in a tractor and wagon and we go down and we go duck hunting. But our guns are put in a case, and they're kept in a case. And they're put in the blind in a case. We exercise gun safety, and if they don't do it, they're asked to leave. So when you go duck hunting, a federal law, a federal firearm law, gives you 3 shots. You have to put a plug in your gun, and you get 3 shots at a duck. But if you want to march into a grade school with 2 AR-15s, they're saying no limit on how many bullets you can take in there. So we have federal regulations on firearms, but we have this insanity of letting young people get their hands on guns, not just AR-15s, guns designed, built, merchandised, and sold to young people that are designed to shoot people. If you're going to buy a gun that's going to be for shooting people, when people carry a gun, I say, what do you got it for? Because if you're carrying a gun, you're saying I'm going to shoot somebody. I don't like handguns. I don't own handguns. I don't own guns designed to kill people. I have no interest in shooting anybody. I'm not gonna shoot anybody, and we gotta get over this, that everybody needs a gun to be safe. Thank you.
Thank you for the great question. Violence is a concern, but just the fact that we're asking how to combat violence is actually amazing. If you look at societies of the past, violence was praised. Town squares, they burned people. We actually are, as a society, getting less and less violence. If you look at statistics, the last 30 years, gun crimes have decreased every single year except during COVID, which tells me a few things. One, if people aren't having opportunities and they're not living their best life, they're more prone to violence. So we definitely have a mental health issue that's definitely present. But we also have the Constitution and our constitutional rights. And when he says that you're allowed to take as many bullets into a school, I don't know what school allows bullets, because all of them I see take gun-free zones. And clearly those laws still have not stopped a shooter. How do we make a change for violence? We have to focus on mental health. We have to focus on giving Hoosiers opportunities to thrive and flourish. When people are thriving and flourishing, and when their wallet is, they're able to spend their money on things that give them opportunities, they have optimism and they don't seek violence. We definitely have to take care of this issue, but we also have to defend our constitutional rights. Thank you.
All right, it is a big issue. It's on everybody's minds. It's in the news. And so I asked the 3 federal candidates, and if you don't mind, I'd like to also ask our 3 state legislative candidates, because there have been state laws and discussions as well. I'm waiting for my crazy primitive timer to run out. Sceniak didn't take as much time as he should have. I'm not going to worry about that with Ryan. 3 more seconds.
Look at my freshwater approach.
Yes, thank you. So, state legislative approaches towards gun violence.
Well, look, I think you just have to look at what I've done. We, in the last legislative session, made it possible for somebody to obtain a firearm in the state without one of these. I carry this. I have it. I paid for it. I was issued it because they were able to check out my background check and issued me a gun license. I voted against that bill. If you send your teenager in to get a lottery ticket, they can't get it. Send your teenager in to get a pack of cigarettes, they can't get it. Send your teenager in to get beer, they can't get it. Send your teenager in to get an AR-15, they walk out with an AR-15. We need to address that, and I'm hopeful that the federal government will address that. I'm not all that hopeful that they will in the state, but you know, if you need to know about Destiny Wells, our candidate for Secretary of State, she leaned over, distressed, and said, if you come July 1, it's harder to vote in this state than it is to get an AR-15. So, you know, Destiny Wells cares a lot about this issue, and I wish that my colleagues in the legislature would care more about this issue, but we need to address guns, but I agree with the previous speakers that this is at the root of it, by no doubt, a mental health issue, and I'm proud that your city council in this city invested more dollars into mental health than any city like it in the state, and that's because of your Democrat city council. Thank you.
So I am no stranger to gun violence. I have lost 3 friends due to gun violence. Last week, a friend lost his nephew due to gun violence. This is nothing new to me, and I see how it hurts families. It hurts an economy, and I believe that mental health is very important to that, but I also believe regulations are needed, and I think there is opportunity here, but the opportunity right now that we have is opportunity to commit crime, and we need to promote an economy and help people that are valued because they're in poverty and have the chance to go rob a gas station, go rob their neighbor because they need something. And I would like to make sure people have what they need so they don't have the chance or need the opportunity to do crime. I also would like to focus on schools. In 2017, a young boy shot himself in front of Central. Those kids were allowed to walk past that body and enter that school. My school received a gun threat. North received a gun threat. We were still going to school that day. Why were we still in school when someone said they were going to shoot our school up? I have no idea why. But they didn't even tell us. They called our parents. And then my mom called me and she let me know that there was someone in our school with a gun. We shouldn't experience that. There needs to be more safety in our schools, and there needs to be more opportunity for people to grow so they don't feel like they need to commit crime.
Last up is Jason Salter. I don't have a lot to add to that. I know that, I'm a gun owner, and I grew up, my grandfathers taught me how to shoot, the Army taught me how to shoot all kinds of things. That was basically my whole job in the Army. Now, I do hear the Constitution brought up a lot, and first time I swore an oath to protect and defend the Constitution, I read it. And you always hear about, the right to bear arms shall not be infringed, but you never hear about the well-regulated part. And it seems to me when kids are dying in schools, the well-regulated part is getting overlooked. Now, personally, I've got cops on both sides of my family. My wife was in the police department until we had our last kid 2 years ago. And in the state of Indiana, I'm going to side with cops as my default position on this issue. So that's where I stand on that.
The first person who spoke tonight was Drew Anderson, a true professional. He did exactly what he was supposed to do, and I didn't follow instructions. I was supposed to say who wrote these questions. I was on the other end of the room. That first question was an amalgam of Ed Adams' question and Kathy Selecki's question. But now I'd like to turn to another big looming issue in a year like this, especially with what's going to be on the news tomorrow night, starting tomorrow night. And this is a mixture of Karen Rising's question and Jane Duesterberg's question. I got to put my glasses back on, sorry, because I'm old enough to remember Vanessa Williams. You're running to be Chief Election Officer for the state of Indiana. What is the best way to fight disinformation about election integrity, and how do you plan to protect the integrity of Indiana's elections? We'll start with Destiny, and then we'll move to Mr. Maurer.
I was out in a national security conference in DC last month, and we talked about how Americans, due to how innovative we are, have created so much technology that we are taking in information faster than we know how to process. And there are people out there taking advantage of it. So I acknowledge this question, and it is a very real issue that is being dealt with at the Pentagon, let alone us trying to make sure that we run fair, free, and secure elections here in Indiana. Let me tell you this. Indiana is not a blue state, obviously. It's not a red state. It's a purple state with a turnout problem. And once we start to acknowledge that, we can get back to implementing fair elections. Hoosiers don't believe that elections are fair. And that is why we are 46th in the nation in registered voter turnout. 46. 2020, when the stakes were so high, 1.6 million registered Hoosiers stayed home. Why is that? Why don't they think it's fair? In the early 2000s, Indiana implemented strict voter ID and went to the Supreme Court. Indiana is always the starter of a lot of bad ideas. Okay, and there became this thing from SCOTUS called voter confidence, and that the state has the ability to instill voter confidence by implementing certain procedures. So every time you see the Republican Party say it's about voter confidence, they are manipulating all of us. All of us. It does not mean that it will make it harder to vote to make you more confident about voting. And so as Secretary of State, I will be that voice, the Democrat in a landscape of Republican elected officials, supermajority legislature, Republican governor, who pushes back and says, no, Holly Sullivan, who was the Secretary of State, now that I'm Secretary of State, let me tell you, we are not the model state. and pull back the curtain and start telling the truth.
Who here has grass lawn, or mowed a grass lawn, has grass lawn at home? Grass? Show your hands, right? It's Indiana. Okay, I think 100% of the hands went up. So there are two ways to handle that. One is to pull weeds, and that's always a losing battle, or nearly always a losing battle, at least in my lawn. The other is to grow more grass, and that's my solution here. We're going to have more of the good stuff, and that's going to displace the bad stuff. So how do we restore trust in our elections? That was the question. How do we fight disinformation? We can cut through all of that with clear, simple confirmation, verification of your vote. Trust but verify. So if you have a receipt for your vote, and you can look it up, go on the Secretary of State's website and see, this is my ballot number, this is my PIN, it's anonymous, it's secure, it's told that the sanctity of your secrecy has not been compromised. You can verify that your vote is counted. It doesn't matter who says what online, because you know your vote is counted. That's how we're going to grow more grass with seeds rather than picking weeds. A couple more points. I agree, our voter turnout is pretty abysmal. And that comes from, we would agree, comes from a lack of trust in our elections. So there are a couple things that we can adjust there. First is the audit process. Currently, we may audit, theoretically, 5 out of 92 counties. And we do that months after the election is certified. So what I'm standing for, and this is a real solution, is we're going to audit all 92 counties, and we're going to do it before an election is certified. It's insane to publish, to say, yes, these are results of our elections, before we even look at what the results that we have. That's our process now, and then it's insane. So we're going to audit all 92 counties and do it before elections are certified. Last thing I want to touch on is one of the reasons people may not show up to vote is because they don't like any of the candidates. It's just not exciting. How many times you've heard that? Or that nothing's going to change. So one of the things that I will support in the General Assembly is, or with the General Assembly, is to be discussed next time.
All right, I went straight to the candidates for Secretary of State because that's the chief election officer for the state, but we've got some terrific office seekers, and I don't want to eat up too much time, but I don't want to ignore you either. So if anybody has a burning idea about a legislative remedy that would help voter turnout and election integrity in Indiana, I'm all ears, and we can just go down the way here if you like. And if you want to pass, you can feel free to pass.
The only thing I want to add, and this should just take a minute, is we do not have constitutional ballot access and partisan laws in Indiana. One of those things that gets passed over is we didn't used to have primary elections, but now that we do have primary elections, only Democrats and Republicans are allowed to participate. We have different laws for different party members, and so we have like 6 different categories of human based on how you can get on the ballot, or how much it costs you to get on the ballot, or how many signatures you have to get on the ballot. And it should be equal for all under law, and that is not the case right now. I just wanted to make sure that was out, because a lot of people don't know that.
I would just add that my campaign, my committee, my website is called Hoosiers for Open Control. And my theory is that part of the voter apathy is feeling that your vote doesn't count, and that when so much control is in the state house, that's part of the problem. I think if voters were voting for the people who had the most influence on their lives, the most influence to affect their well-being, they'd be more likely to get out and vote. So I'm trying to move more authority from the state house back to local governments, back to what we used to call home rule, where most of the decisions were made and the people were empowered locally in their communities, not reliant on state house decisions by largely anonymous politicians that they never see nor have a stake in their communities.
So see how many young people are here tonight? Hardly any. You know what they say? It doesn't matter. So what did our state legislators do? In Bloomington, they're so scared of Bloomington, they sliced it up in 3 districts. That's not democracy, that's the opposite of democracy. And when we see low voter turnout, that's exactly what the Republicans want to see. They want low voter turnout, they want people to be discouraged, and they want people to feel disenfranchised in this state. I want just the opposite. So how do you do that? What I'm learning is you gotta give people hope that by voting for Ray McCormick, then their issues are gonna be addressed. They're gonna be heard. Young people are gonna have a future, because I'm gonna do something about climate change, and that means a lot to young people. So giving people hope is the answer to the apathy, and it's the poison that will stop the Republicans and their supermajority. Thank you.
When I was about 10 years old, I was asking my mom about elections, and she said, well, it's about voting for the lesser of two evils. That's what my generation grew up hearing. We have to vote for the lesser of two evils because we have no optimism in this system. It doesn't matter what the Republicans want, it doesn't matter what the Democrats want. It's about what we the people want. And we have to give opportunity for quality candidates. We're not seeing that. This election is a perfect example of that. And I'm going to point out to Todd Young. He got somebody kicked off the primary ballot just so he didn't have to have competition in the primaries. That's not opportunity, and that's not having the we the people voice heard. Why can't we have a competition among quality candidates on our primary ballot? The Democrats did it as well. They only had one person run for the Senate race. People are looking and saying, these people don't represent my voice, why should I come out and vote? Young voters are saying, look, I don't recognize either of these, and that's why I'm not even registering to vote, because they don't represent my voice. We have to give more opportunities for quality candidates, including other parties besides the Republicans and Democrats. And this year, I'm excited because I believe the political spectrum is switching, and people are really looking for another voice.
So I believe something that's very important to help people come out and change our voter turnout, that didn't come out right, is, like he said, giving hope and change. I feel like that's very important. I am a young person. I believe that young people feel represented by another young person. I can go and sit at the skate park with people and it not be weird and learn young people's issues and be able to bring that youth to the General Assembly. And I think it's very needed to have that young perspective because young people are what changed the world. You know, the young people come in and that's how we live. And so it's very important to nurture these minds and get people excited for elections and let them know that it does matter. Your vote does matter, because that's something I did not think mattered. I was like, well, every year I still get screwed over by the government, and so I don't feel like I should vote. And people need to know that voting for your locals, voting for your state, and voting up, that's how you get the policies that you would like. And so I also want to bring awareness to young people on how your voting matters, because I just thought my presidential vote was what mattered, but that's not the big root of it all. So I want to bring awareness to, the younger groups as well.
This is a risky thing to say, but I'm going to say it. I hope you'll be good to me. I mean it sincerely. When in my first term, I was the youngest member of the General Assembly, and to have somebody running as the youth voice is fun for me, because I am the youth voice in the General Assembly, and she treats me like I'm the old man, right? So more power to you. Look, I think it's important that we have security in our elections. I have voted for measures in the Indiana General Assembly to ensure that our elections are safe. However, let me say this. Where Republicans win, they say our elections are safe. Where Democrats win, we say our elections are safe. And so I think that it is probably fair to say that we do a pretty damn good job in this country of securing our elections and ensuring that votes matter. What we don't do a good job at, and it's been mentioned, is giving the people in this state the idea that their vote matters. And I think it's important that we do a better job of that, but that is because of one reason. It's because the supermajority in the state ignores that vote. It looks at polling and votes around mental health and ignores the Hoosiers' request for more funding in mental health. It looks at voter after voter after voter who says public education matters to them, and it steals from the public education system. And so look, The problem with our elections, I agree again with Destiny Wells, it's a turnout problem. It's instilling confidence in the people whom we elect in the supermajority of this state, not really truly in our elections, because I gotta tell you, the governor's not claiming that the state of Indiana got it wrong. The current Secretary of State says the elections ran perfectly. You go down through 71 Republicans that got elected in this state in the Indiana General Assembly, they all say that the vote was right. So I think in this state, we need to do a better job at ensuring that people feel that their vote matters, and we do that by representing them in the Indiana General Assembly. That's the state representative I've been, that's the state representative I'll continue to be.
Okay, the next question in the pile is from some unknown woman named Cheryl Schultz, who has brought us here together tonight. And it's another one that's very timely. Next month, we're about to find out that the Supreme Court will undo a precedent that's lasted almost 50 years. And so her question says, what, if anything, can be done to protect women's reproductive rights in Indiana? And if you don't mind, I'd like to direct this, since starting next month, this will now be an issue decided at the state level. Let's deal with our state legislative candidates, and then we can go back and do a little bit of cleanup after that. We're doing fine on time, I think. We're getting through the questions, but as always, being concise is good. Let me start with Jada Burton.
Okay, so this was a hard question to sit on, and I personally do support, women's reproductive rights. I support personal autonomy and people being able to make decisions for their bodies as they would, and not, if you want to wear an orange shirt, you can. I can wear red. I shouldn't have to wear orange because you're wearing orange. I think it's very important that we help people that are having children. The cause of most people that have abortions is because they can't provide for their children. And I think in Indiana, we say we provide for our children, but there's a lot of children in our adoptions. There's a lot of people on welfare. 7% of children are in extreme poverty. Why are our children having to deal with poverty? And then we want people to bring children into poverty. Children shouldn't have to live through poverty. That's not fruitful. That doesn't give them the opportunity to be productive members of our society. I believe that forcing people to have children is not fair, and it doesn't create an economy that we want to live in.
I would like to answer this question, however, I'm gonna let it Destiny answer this question. I think it's important that the women speak on this issue and that the men listen.
I appreciate that as being what will be the woman running the highest on the Democratic ticket for the state of Indiana, so thank you very much. Look, I've been stomping my foot, Cheryl can tell you, Edie can tell you about Dobbs v. Jackson since last summer. We knew this was coming. It was no surprise. The Supreme Court is 6'3" conservative. This was all by design. And it has been years and years and years in the making to have the composition of this court to finally overrule Roe. No surprise. However, Roe does just not affect women of childbearing years or little girls who are raped. It is going to affect everybody, because as an attorney and a litigator, I can tell you that Supreme Court precedent relies on Roe and its 50 years of precedent. I won't get into stare decisis, but I'll just say this. It is like pulling the string on the quilt of privacy rights. What are privacy rights? Those are your personal liberties. We are pulling the string. It is only going to get worse. Let me break it down like this, and I'll thread it back to the ballot box. We are not a representative democracy when a supermajority legislature wants the governor to call them back in, and it all rests on the political ambitions of that one man, of the governor, what race he wants to run in 2024, and how he wants to build out his record. Because that is what is going on in the background right now. And when it happens, we are going to see the most awful effects. No woman should die because the political ambitions of one man, let alone a supermajority legislature. We are not a representative democracy when women don't even have the choice to live.
Look, I think it's important that I think that we will either be called in or deal with this issue in the General Assembly in the next session. And I think it's important that we tell the voters where we stand on this. And in my doing that, I want to walk you through, I want to remind my Republican colleagues that it was 5 Republican appointees that decided Roe. And then I want to take you from Justice Blackmun's decision in Roe and take you to 1992 when it was readdressed and reversed in part in Pennsylvania v. Casey. And in Casey, I think, you know, there's a lot of powerful stuff in the decisions around Roe and Casey. But in Casey, there's a line that sticks out to me that I think is what this issue is about. And it's that a generation of women, and now 2 or 3 or 4 generations of women, have grown up free to accept Roe's concept of liberty in a woman's ability to act, not right to act, not their you know fun dinner clubs, you know, gossip, their ability to act, the concept of a woman's ability to act. That's what conservative and liberal and moderate justices said about this issue and what it means for the United States. And I think that we really need to take a look at what exactly this is. And I know that a lot of people want to make this about one healthcare decision, of which I think it's important women make their own healthcare decisions. But I think it's bigger than that. And we know it's bigger than that because the Supreme Court told us so in 1992, where they said it has to do with the concept of liberty, of a woman's ability to make those decisions. That's powerful stuff. That's where I'll stand, and I'll vote against any effort to restrict a woman's ability to choose.
Okay, Jason Salter.
Fundamentally, my governing ideology, philosophy is bottom-up government, local control, especially in a time when there's so much change in the world and we need that agility to adapt. But when there are issues that cause chaos and suffering, especially those that cross state line, those decisions need to be addressed at the national level. Unfortunately, that's apparently going to change when it comes to Roe versus Wade. Roe versus Wade was a compromise that seems to have resolved the issue effectively for a long time, and I will oppose anything that puts further constraints on a woman's right to choose beyond Roe versus Wade. That said, I've been looking a lot about women's health issues lately in Indiana, and there is a correlation across the country with women's voting participation on how well their health issues, how well they're served generally in the state. So I think we're 44th in the country as far as we're ranked on female participation in voting. So I would just encourage that awareness come this fall.
All right, and as I said, I promised if anybody else wants to weigh in, but please weigh in quickly because I'm mindful of the clock. It looks like we have 3 juicy questions coming, and I think we can get through 3 questions before we get out of here. As if Ryan Hatfield doesn't grab the mic twice. But it's his birthday, so we're going to let that one fly. Okay. So we'll go to you first.
Someone asked me, how does this decision change the way you're running? It doesn't. I've always stated politicians should not act as our physicians. It doesn't matter who you are, your medical rights are absolutely essential. But what I'm disappointed in is our political process and how they're manipulating votes. They use this issue every election to manipulate your vote. Since 1974, since it was decided, 4 times the Democrats have controlled the Senate, the House, and the presidency. Did they secure your rights as a woman? No. 4 times the Republicans have controlled the presidency, the Senate, and the House. Did they push their agenda? No, because they continue to use this issue to manipulate your vote. That's sad and disappointing. I do consider myself a pro-life candidate, but the pro-life part of me knows that how we make change is through social. We're gonna give birth control options that are available to everybody. It's giving knowledge to Hoosiers. It's also making sure that children don't have to grow up in poverty because we set them up with a well-done economy and that we don't have the inflation problem that we have currently. So there's a lot of things that we can do to reduce abortions without taking away your medical rights. And that's where I stand as a candidate.
How does this issue tie in with Secretary of State elections, especially if you're male? We all heard that this issue is going to be pushed down from the Supreme Court to the states. So we know what the problem is, and now the question is, what are the actual solutions? How do we get from where we are to where we want to be? Not just who believes this is a bigger problem, but who's actually got tools to do this. And this is what I'm presenting to you. This is one of the things that I advocate for, is a referenda and ballot initiatives. Two key tools that allow us, we the people, to directly pass the laws that govern us. This is the core of self-rule. I see a head shaking here. Think about the state legislature. Think about how much effort it's going to take to overcome the supermajority to change, to codify Roe v. Wade in Indiana. Wouldn't it be nice if we had a tool that allowed us to write our own laws for we the people, so that way we can govern ourselves? And certainly no offense to Mr. Hatfield and the 149 other state representatives and senators, but just like Amazon revolutionized our lives, we could order directly, we could deal directly, and cut out a bloated, expensive, and inconvenient middleman. That's government. That's what we have now. They're not serving us, they're stymieing us. So if we can change that and go direct and write our own laws and have the power to live the life that we want to live the way we want to live it, wouldn't it be great if you can go to your neighbors, get signatures, and say, we've got enough to write our laws for ourselves? That's the power that I'm talking about. The second piece, and this is a follow-up from before, is similar power. And this is a solution that I want to give to you and to me. It's the same. And that's NOTA. Anybody here of none of the above before? 1, 2 hands, okay. Imagine we're voting on favorite ice cream. Chocolate, vanilla, or none of the above. The chocolate lobby has the chocolate candidate on the ballot. The vanilla lobby has the vanilla candidate on the ballot. But we've got such apathetic turnout because you might like strawberry or cookies and cream like I do, or mocha chip.
I hate to cut you off. But
Okay, well, we did share time here. We did double up time, so we're gonna take liberties. Let's take liberties. So, okay, so what it allows us to do is to vote against the candidates on the ballot, and that allows you to say, if you're a Democrat, to vote against a Republican in a one-way unopposed race. That's a powerful tool for anybody, any Hoosier, wanting to control the government. And that's the tool I want to give to you. Thank you.
I worked 10 years on a wetlands project called the Goose Pond. And when nobody thought it could happen, I worked for 10 years to make it to happen. And young children and people from all over the United States come there now, and they see birds that have never been seen in the United States. I worked with the Indianapolis Zoo to do a $1 million video where I was featured on a 40-foot screen talking about what I and farmers are doing to save the dolphins. 5,000 kids a day for years saw that video at the dolphin show. The corn I grow is used for baby formula. So I try to grow the healthiest corn with the least insecticide, the best, most nutritious corn I can. And it goes into baby formula. To get letters and cards, a bunch of them, hundreds of them, saying that I'm a murderer. Because I say when a woman's in a doctor's office with her husband or her father or her mother, that it's none of my business to be in that room, and the government should stay out of that room. There's not enough room. When we want to talk about how you're going to get people to vote, how you're going to get gun control, how are you going to better this country, put women in leadership positions. A lot of the things that I got done were only because women were in leadership positions. They worked together. They were great leaders. They were partners. That's how we're going to solve the workforce problem that we have. Let's get women, quit pushing them down and discriminating against them, and let's lift them up so everybody can have hope. So let's put women in leadership positions and give them their shot.
Now, ordinarily, I like to make fun of Republicans any chance I get, but I do want to, in theme of what I was talking about with my introduction, I think what we really need to do if we want to make, in fact, just to kind of clarify, I don't think anybody in this room wants to have SWAT teams kicking in doors for people who had an abortion. None of us are into that. But to be fair to Republicans, I think we all need to be a little more sympathetic of the other side, because nobody likes abortion. Nobody likes it. But a lot of Republicans think, oh, I'm going to get an abortion even though I'm not pregnant because I just love abortion. Nobody thinks like that. But we need to do the same on the other side. We need to understand that Republicans have their own feelings too, and they have the best interest of their mothers and their daughters and their wives at heart. And if we're more sympathetic to each other, and if we stop throwing terms at each other like pro-life, pro-choice, that sounds great if you're in that camp. But it's used as a rallying cry and a hammer on the other side. And I think what we need to do, this is just another example where an issue becomes inflammatory, and as I think, James, you were talking about, we're using this as a petri dish kind of a thing. Let's throw in, let's see if he's going to pass the litmus test. And it's too easy to just say, I'm for this, I'm against it, when this is a very personal issue with very troubling consequences, and nobody likes making these decisions. And if we could just talk to each other one-on-one in the General Assembly and in the federal, it might come back to the federal offices again. It probably will. If there's going to be problems at the state level, it's going to come back to the federal, at least the federal courts again, when there are problems across state lines. So it will be a federal issue again. And what I intend to do is talk to my Republican and Democrat side and say, guys, come on, let's get in a room and let's talk this out. Because nobody likes this issue. It's an ugly issue. And we need to talk about it sympathetically and with some kind of passion that is from the right part of our heart, not the tribal, angry, drum pounding kind of part of our heart. We need to start thinking, ordinarily, I like to talk about facts, solutions, specific proposals, but this is one case where I'm talking empathy, sympathy, listening to each other, and trying to come to some reasonable solutions of something that really probably doesn't even have a government solution at all.
All right, next question. This is another ugly issue because we just got our energy bills. And there were two questions, one from Brent McDonald and one from Christopher Norick. And I'm going to put them together because they're both on similar subjects. And I'm going to direct them, if you don't mind, again to our state legislative candidates. And then we can go in and clean up if people have something to say. In the interest of time, if we could keep it quick, like a lightning round. Just to maximize the number of people who can say what they want to say. The first question reads as follows. Gas and electric prices are rising. What steps should be taken to get them under control? And the other one is a little closer to home. Any thoughts on affordability and utility affordability in southern Indiana? We have the highest energy burden in the state. Let's start with Jason Sahlstrom, and then we'll go to Jada Burton and Ryan Hadfield.
So there's three things that I want to take to the State House on this issue. First thing is, I believe that, and I don't have any short-term solutions, but for structurally, I think that part of the solution, long-term, is getting regional proportional representation on the IURC and the OUCC, so that there's somebody from our region that we can look in the eye and hold accountable for the decisions that are being made up there. So regional representation proportional to the impact on the IURC and the OUCC. Second thing is, Indiana needs a long-term energy and water strategy, something by which these bodies their decisions can be informed versus the winds from whatever direction they're blowing at the time. So a long-term energy and water strategy for the state of Indiana towards securing energy and water and a prosperous future for the state, long-term, to inform decision-making. And the third thing is reviving Mitch Daniels' Energizing Indiana. A new version, 2.0, updated, including net metering and those types of considerations. Those are the three things that I would champion at the State House.
So this is a very important thing to me. It's on my platform. I really want to focus on helping lower our cost of living here in Indiana. I would like to focus on having monopolies here in Indiana that can just prey on the consumers and have whatever they want, and then we're left with nothing. I don't think I have a perfect answer for this right now. It's something that I want to work on, and I really would like to talk to individual people and see what they feel like, especially DACE, because they have a lot of great ideas. And I would like to talk to them about, how do you feel like we lower energy? Because there's a lot of people in DACE that actually have knowledge on energy. And what I'm going through Google is just not always the best solution, because there's so many different answers. So I believe people with actual knowledge on this, and talking to them is how I'll be able to represent us in the state and actually do things that the Hoosiers would like.
I've been proud to serve on the 21st Century Task Force, Energy Task Force in the state, which was charged with a effort to set out a long-term energy plan. I don't think that that's what we've gotten. I've been vocal about that in public and in the committee. But I gotta tell you, the committee changed drastically in the last legislative session, and it was for a reason. It was because when I proposed a minority report in the 21st Century Energy Task Force that came up with the findings that I thought that we heard, the lay folks, the experts on the committee, so the task force is made up of legislators and experts, and the experts from the universities agreed with me. And we got so many votes that they had to continue the hearing to make sure that they had enough votes to beat it by a couple of votes. And next year they came back to the General Assembly and removed those members from the legislative task force and added Republican legislators, not Republican and Democrat legislators, just Republican legislators. So that's the kind of leadership you're getting. But I think that it comes from a couple of places. One, we need to look at, and particularly I'll speak to Southern Indiana, we need to look at Centerpoint and their operation in Centerpoint South and Centerpoint North. I'll have more on that that I'm not prepared to talk about tonight, plus I'm getting harassed for how long I'm talking. But I also think that it's important that we are studying. I'm actively involved, working every single day right now on blackouts that we expect to come, failures. And that is a state failure. That is a GOP failure. That generation is on the state. And you can pass the prices of gas elsewhere. You can pass the supply to MISO and other places. Generation and the expectation of generation is a state failure, and your bill should be $0 in any month in which you have a blackout.
So I've got two questions teed up, and I know each question round takes a long time. So on the other hand, gas and utility prices are important. So if you've got something quick to add, I'm happy to share.
I hate to see it, this is actually a federal issue because it's not just gas and energy that's going up. You know that everything else is going up as well. Inflation is a federal issue, and inflation is everywhere and always a monetary policy issue. And it's just the case that in the last years of both of the last president, actually, look to see since 1913, we've been printing dollars like monopoly money. The more you print, the less each one of them is worth. And in just the years between Trump and Biden, now his first year, 40% of all dollars ever printed were printed. And so you can see the massive spike in inflation is not just Biden, and a lot of Republicans say it is. It started with Trump. And this inflation is what's really at the root of all of these rising prices. It's a monetary policy issue, and that's federal. I'd love to talk about that later.
All right, let's make it clear, the cost of sunlight is not going up. The cost of solar is going down dramatically. The market is driving solar into our area. We have multiple coal-fired power plants that are shutting down. All these power lines across my farms, through your backyards, over these highways, are where these solar companies want to be. They're going into these power plants and surrounding them with solar. And that's going to be low-cost energy. It's going to come from the sun. And data processing is going to come. Data processing technology drives the economy. So the big tech companies are going to come here. There's going to be an unbelievable economic boom, and I'm not predicting it. I've already signed the contract, and so have my neighbors. It's here. Solar is going to surround us. It's going to make us the Electron Valley. We're going to have unprecedented economic boom here. And what I'm working on, because I do things, not talk about it, I'm working with these solar companies, so we design them. So we grow stuff under them. We don't take the land out of production. We graze sheep, we grow watermelons, we make pollinator habitat for monarch butterflies. And this isn't a prediction. This isn't something that can be driven by the state. It's here. It's coming in. It's going to make unprecedented tax revenue for these areas. And for me, I'm signed on at $1,000 an acre for 55 years. Unprecedented income for landowners. So the boom is here. The coal plants are shutting down and have shut down. Solar is going to surround us, and that's our future.
There is a museum of coal in Kentucky, and it has solar panels on the building. True story, look it up. And that's been a couple years now. So change is coming, I absolutely agree with that. I think what we see here is we have one utility company called a monopoly, and we have government working or authorizing that monopoly. Perhaps if we have some competition, we might have lower costs, more options. Anyone hear of Albert Einstein? One of his favorite quotes, my favorite quotes of him is, we cannot use the same thinking to solve our problems that we used when we created them. So more government and more monopolies, I'm sorry to say, is not going to solve our problem. Let's have more competition, less regulation, more solar, more wind, more everything, because ultimately that is going to drive innovation and drive down costs. Thank you.
Okay, more on this question? Okay, my hat is off to all of you for coming out on a stormy Wednesday night. We're not done yet, but before we lose you, I just wanted to say thanks for coming. My life is dedicated to civic education and civic engagement, so anytime there's a room full of citizens in June asking questions of candidates, it just makes me feel good inside. The next question is a terrific one. It's not a fun one. It's from Elizabeth Wallace. She says, what can the state of Indiana do to address our terrible maternal mortality rate, which is on a par with that of Sri Lanka? Our infant mortality rate is also higher than the national average. I know there's been some state legislative efforts to do something, and we're not moving the needle as much as we need to. And I made a lot of noise with this 1-minute timer because now I've got it down to a minute. I had to go up instead of down because I don't know how to go down. I don't know how to clear the thing. So there you go. I can activate the timer, or we can just be really disciplined about knocking out answers. But the question of the moment is maternal mortality, infant mortality in Indiana, or if you're running for federal office beyond our borders.
We can elect more women. If you look at the Indiana Senate, it's, I think 1 out of 5 are women. And so when you have women leading, you have women supporting women-centric policies, like work accommodations for pregnant women so they're not stacking shelves, right? And then they're not contributing to the infant mortality rate. We have all these compounded issues because we're not serving women, because we don't have women at the table. And so I will be a woman at the table as Indiana Secretary of State. It is going to be the summer of women because Dobbs is going to happen. We are going to be running a statewide women ticket, more details to follow. Wink, wink. And women are going to organize in Vanderburgh and Warwick County from the local up, and I'm so happy to be the standard bearer of this movement. It begins with women showing up, and we are going to show up. We're showing up yesterday, today, and at the polls in November. Thank you.
If you're a woman in this state, you're more likely to lose your baby if you give birth to it in the state of Indiana than if you were to give birth to it in Iraq. I was the first man to join the maternal and infant mortality caucus, an effort to bring awareness to it in the legislature, thanks to Representative Vanessa Summers, a good friend of mine and a leader on this issue. We'll continue to talk about it. We'll continue to beat the drum on it. The truth is, we need to elect leaders who will vote for the provisions that Destiny's discussing, and to get into the healthcare aspects of this, but also to ensure that we are, the governor made this a platform of his campaign, and then he stopped talking about it. And we've seen some increase, some improvement in the state of Indiana. We're still among the worst in the nation. So we need to do more, and we need to be better, and I have been on the forefront of this issue. I'm working with Vanessa Summers to make sure that this is at the forefront of this session and every session until we do better. Thank you.
I agree with Ms. Wells that we do need more women in office that can speak on these things. A lot of women, when you go to the hospital and you talk about your pains with a male doctor, he will look at you and say, you're okay. I believe that it's very important to have more women, and also there's a nurse group that I would like to get in with and talk to them about the medical institution that we have here, because it is not good. I had a friend who lost her sister because at St. Mary's, they dropped her sister after she was born. That's crazy. We need to have good medical legislation and also more women in office that promotes that.
To be clear, infant mortality isn't just a women issue, it's a Hoosier issue, and it affects everybody. Babies dying is something that's real, that's happening in Indiana. Anyone who has a medical background can tell you that we are absolutely failing on this issue. So when we talk about infant mortality, we need to talk about solutions, not just who we need in office. The solutions I present is a lot in my Medical Freedom Act. And I got an email the other day from Catherine. Catherine is a nurse in Northern Indiana. She said, James, right now, the nurses have a shortage that is absolutely hurting Hoosiers. This is a shortage that's comparable to our teachers. And it's something that will not help infant mortality rates. She claims that they are being so regulated that they can't even do their own job right now. That is sad when a medical professional feels that they can't even go into their own hospital and take care of the patients that they promised to take care of. So we have to support nurses. We have to support medical freedom that allows for patents to go away and for true free medical choices for Hoosiers all across this state. There are solutions that we can talk about. We can talk about who to vote in, but I want to hear solutions.
Think about each one of our local communities, really local, our neighborhoods. Think about the churches, the different nonprofits, the other organizations, the people that you see in vans delivering food. Think about really local. It's not some big program. It's not some big answer that comes out of the State House. It's a local group of people. They're organizing themselves. They're asking for private donations often to enact those services and deliver them. We all know we need solutions, but the solutions that are best needed, the ones that are needed most, are the ones that become ultra-local. And for that, we need a government that stays out of the way, or at least facilitates local creation of local services. And so one connection for the Secretary of State's office is the Business Services Division and licensing businesses, including nonprofits. So how do we make it easier for a nonprofit to open up in your community and help pregnant mothers make sure that they're getting food? If they can't get resources from hospitals or churches or other institutions, how can we organize through other organizations, new approaches, new solutions, the kind that are really local, the kind that understand our communities, understand our neighborhoods, and are best able to solve the problems. That's how we can solve this together.
Thank you. We have to address poverty, and it's out there not only in the inner city, but it's out there in rural Indiana. We have to address our healthcare system. A lot of the primary care doctors that would take care of women in their pregnancies and so forth, they're disappearing out of the countryside, so you have to drive a long way. Regulations are definitely getting in the way of being able to provide good health care. Nutrition is important, so that pregnant mother and the vitality of that fetus and so forth is dependent upon good nutrition, but also not smoking, not doing drugs. Drugs are dragging down our society. I'm not blaming women for that, but all of our communities, talking with Noah, our great candidate for sheriff, is that, it's having a huge impact in our community. So we have to address multiple things that are impacting women in their pregnancies and so forth. So, like the WIC program, that's the one I'm familiar with. So when we grew our peaches, we could take fresh peaches to the farmer's market, and the next day, that mother could use that voucher to have nutritious peaches. So programs like that are very important, and they're being attacked right now. So, thank you.
Other than believing that women need to vote to make sure that their voice is represented in the halls of power, I'm just a wonky problem solver. So I'm not, I've not got my head around this issue yet. But if you want to see the data, that's what I've got in my hand. I've got a handful of data that I'm starting to inform my understanding of these issues and possibly hopefully arrive at some solutions. But the only answer I have right now is to echo what we heard earlier: women need to vote and get elected.
I work in healthcare, but frankly, this is mostly a state issue, so I'm going to kind of shut up on this.
Okay, so they always tell you to read the room. I've got one last question, and it's a good one. If you're willing, we can do just a quick lightning round and get to hear from those who wish to speak, and then if you all want to stick around, and if the candidates can stick around, maybe you can exchange contact information. Everybody okay for one last question? This is from the remarkable Gene Webb. I'm embarrassed and sad that we always put this question off or last. Gene says, I believe all elected officials should act to address climate change. If elected, what will you do? So climate, a pressing issue. It doesn't necessarily affect every office sought in exactly the same way, but if you've got something to share about climate, you've got your audience here. Here you go.
Oh boy, and as I was talking with you, this is a huge issue that goes across national borders. It's inherently worldwide. So unfortunately, even at the federal level, we have issues that we can't really touch. And except when we pass laws in this country to restrict a business here and we push it overseas, the smokestacks that we could regulate a little bit over here, maybe not as much as we wanted, but the smokestacks we could regulate a little bit here are now across in the ocean completely unregulated. If we have solved some kind of labor problem here, it's going to go overseas. We know how this works. Globally speaking, that smoke still comes across. The radiation still comes across. The fish are still poisoned coming from Japan. So it's not like we can make this only local or only federal. Now, there are statewide issues that we can affect. For instance, coal is a big industry here. There are a lot of things we can affect. And as far as what I was talking about with my introduction, once again, this is one of those areas where people are so angry and so spiteful of each other that facts no longer really have much play. I just want to make the point very quickly that the theory of regulation is great, but the fact of legislation, the fact of regulation, is that there's a revolving door between the regulators and the regulated. Right now, there's so much corruption going on. We know how this goes. If you're a Democrat, you used to say that, Pfizer and Big Pharma, Big Ag, they were the bad guys. That changes when something like COVID comes along. Now they're the good guys. Republicans now say, oh, now Big Pharma is the bad guys. We each have our favorite dog in each hunt. And that's not how this is supposed to work. The way it's supposed to work is we're going to be looking at facts all the time, not just when it suits us, and not just when it suits our ideology. And that's where I've been working in science my whole life. And what I see right now is the politicization of science, making everything political, making everything funded by politicians, making all of the people who are funded by politicians taking more money under the table. And we're seeing that with the revelations from the Pfizer documents, all that's gone on between Monsanto and Bayer, all of the problems that we've had with even solar companies, which I love solar. The problems we've had once you inject federal money into something, then it becomes corrupt. It's just the way it works. So the regulation and the reality are two different things. And I wish I had more time to talk on this, and I'd love to, but this is an intensely local, state, federal, and global issue that I wish we could really address rationally and without getting mad at each other.
I believe that the three solutions I proposed earlier can have an effect on more responsible energy policies. What I can tell you, and what is in my wheelhouse day to day is helping businesses grow businesses. And the most effective argument I have with people that are skeptical about climate change is explaining to them that regardless of what you believe, it is a huge market opportunity. So I think that at the State House, I can win more supporters with that argument that there is a business opportunity for the state of Indiana by going in on responsible energy and other climate-related solutions.
All right, this is what I'm running on. Thanks for the question. There's only one solution, only one, that can keep us from going beyond the tipping point. We're on the tipping point now where we go too far. And that's creating, and there's a mathematical genius that you can watch on YouTube. You have to create a soil carbon sponge. The carbon dioxide's already up there. You use the energy of the sun through photosynthesis to pull the carbon, put it into the soil. It energizes the soil. So you grow bigger crops, you grow more food, and you solve this problem. How do you do it with a soil carbon sponge? We're the leader in the United States in southwestern Indiana. You're driving by it every day. We're growing cover crops. We're using no-till. People look at southwestern Indiana all over the United States as the model that's getting there. Tillable land, prairies, grazing land is millions and millions of acres, not only in this country, but around the world. As we adopt those principles, we will save the planet using our land and putting the carbon where it belongs. I got 2 hours on that.
Farmers don't need to be told to take care of their land because they are aligned. They want to preserve it, protect it, and give it in as good a condition, if not better, to their children and future generations. We don't need to legislate this part. What we do need to do is we do need to let the free market solve this. We do need to step back and let businesses form, technologies take hold, and changes be brought. Think about all the innovations and efficiency that we've had over the last 10, 20, 50 years. We consumed during COVID, right? Think how many gallons of gasoline that saved. What we need is innovation. What we need is to be able to have young people, particularly, with ideas, desire, drive, and the freedom outside of the thumb of government to create businesses and solve our problems for the future. It's not just one solution, but so many more that we can't even imagine now. So let's not pretend, but instead, let's step back and let innovators innovate, and let's enjoy those efficiencies, and let's solve these problems.
Thanks for the great question. At the heart of this issue is we all want to take care of our planet and pass it on to future generations in a better condition than it is now, which is absolutely essential. When I look at my nieces and when I look at my nephews, I want them to have the same opportunities and even more opportunities, which includes a cleaner and more efficient planet. So how do we look at solutions? Because I run a solution-based campaign. The first solution starts with me, right? You have to look at inside for your own solutions. Our military complex is absolutely ridiculous right now. It's not talked about, but it's the #1 polluter in the world. Why? Why are we polluting our own world with our military complex that's way too large right now, outspending every other nation at a ridiculous rate, and it's still polluting our world? There's other solutions that have come up, and I agree with them. We need to encourage farmers to use that carbon back in their soil. We need to utilize solar. Solar for you right now is about $35,000 to put on your house, but that's something that we can look at in the future. How do we reduce those prices so that more Hoosiers have that available to them? But taking care of our planet is absolutely essential, and I want to support future generations to give them a better planet than I had growing up.
Okay, I think I was like 17 when I heard of climate change, and I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna die. I won't live to have kids. And I really wanna make sure we have a solution so that fear is not just sitting in my heart and I can have the luxury of having a family. Thank you, Mr. Hatfield. That would be great. I think it's very important that we find cost-effective ways to help with the climate change, but I also think that it's very important for us to focus on how we can keep a clean environment. Indiana is leading in air pollution. And we have 7 coal plants in Evansville, and there's 16 in Indiana. We are also leading lung cancer because our air is so polluted. I think Mr. McCormick has a great idea. Never heard of that. I would like to sit down and talk to you more because I would like to find solutions for Indiana that don't end up screwing us in the end with our budget.
Look, I think it's, look, there's no doubt that we have to reduce the CO2. We have to ensure that we reverse the impact of melting ice on the polars. In an effort for time, and I gotta tell you, one of the problems with a town hall like this is that they ask a question that deserves a complicated, sophisticated answer, and they ask you to shut up. And that's no disrespect. He's doing a good job. He's doing what he was supposed to do. But it's important to meet with you. But those of you in the room who care about this issue probably have met with me. And all I can tell you is that I consider climate change to be one of the quintessential threats that we face going forward, and I consider it in every single vote I make.
2 things. One, I totally agree with you, Ray. Unfortunately, I completely disagree with you, Jeff. My dad, who's a farmer, does not mind collaborating with the government when it comes to taking care of his grass waterways to prevent erosion and to promote conservation. That's 1. 2, Democrats. I'm looking at all the other Democrats in the room because it doesn't really fit into my platform too much. We have to talk climate change. Polling has showed that the young voter needs to hear about climate change if they're going to come vote in November. So I'm really happy we fit that question in as the last question. Thanks.
Thank you for your patience, everybody. I want to thank Cheryl Schultz and Edie Hardcastle and Drew Anderson and all those who put in the time to make this event happen. I want to thank all of you for coming out tonight and asking such terrific questions. And I'd like to ask you to join me in thanking these candidates. And that's a wrap. Thank you.